And there was a moment where I was looking down and I saw the mess that I had made, and I said, "Hey, dude, you got to come here." And he came over, opened up the door, saw what was going on, and kind of said, "Oh shit!" And I'll never forget this because I looked at the other corpsman and I said, "Well, aren't you gonna give me some Novocaine?" And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Aren't you numb enough as it is?" And that was a moment of kind of like just a snap to it moment. At that point, I was like, I have to do something because I do want to have kids in the future. I do want to have a family. I do want to move beyond this moment. And I started spending time at the beach, and I got into meditation. And
Welcome back to another episode of CrashinConvos. In this episode, we have an extraordinary individual named Jon Turner. Jon Turner is a United States Marine Corps veteran, the founder of Accipiter Fieldcraft and Wild Roots Farming. Jon Turner continues the legacy of his family who were homesteaders and continues to find his path to healing while at the same time helping others. In this podcast, we get into his story, what his transition was like from the military, why he left the military. Without further ado, Jon Turner.
so my name's Jon Turner. I live here in Vermont. I've been here for almost 18 years since I got out of the Marine Corps. I grew up in northern Connecticut around the university and was always intrigued by the farms that were around us. My mom, she used to take us up to the horse stables at Yukon, and I got to spend some time with those animals. And so from a very early age, I've had a deep rooted connection with the landscape and with animals and nature. And that certainly is what I'm doing now. I didn't know it at the time, but when I was in the Marine Corps, I was carrying on a legacy of my family. I've had a family member in every war going back to the Revolution, and so, and the majority of them were also homesteaders on my father's side from Tennessee and Kentucky. And so I'm kind of picking up the torch where my grandparents left off. Um, where I do now is I run Wild Roots Community Farm and Accipiter Fieldcraft up here in Vermont. And we are a 10-acre operation dedicated to community resilience through food systems education and wilderness living skills.
It's pretty fascinating. One of the things I've found is when people like exit the military in whatever way, it's interesting how they find their way back to where it all started. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And I was fortunate enough to have that. I know we both know lots of people who never got back to that point, which is really unfortunate. And a lot of those folks became statistics in some regard. But for me, I recognized, shortly after getting out of the Marine Corps that I didn't want to quit on my life. And man, I've been at that point several times just because the resurgence of emotions and memories and reliving those experiences is a real thing. And it's difficult to navigate when they compound on top of each other. But I think that me coming up to Vermont when I got out without any agenda, I just had a high school buddy up here, and essentially had my first sense of freedom since forever, and was able to kind of clear my head a little bit and find some clarity. And doing so in the wooded environment, I think was most beneficial for me and reminded me of where I came from for sure.
Yeah, and that's and like when did you start to like kind of figure out like I need to get back to nature? Like was there something that happened or was it just kind of by happenstance or you just took a walk? Like when did that kind of click for you?
When I was still in the Marine Corps, after my third deployment, which ended up being my last one, um, I had some pretty bad issues with the reintegration process. Um, Going from Ramadi to civilian life was very difficult for me as a 21-year old, um, with multiple brain injuries at that point, and I started drinking heavily, more so than what I did after my previous deployments. Um, Acknowledged that I had issues with what I was feeling, and I didn't want to let that go by the wayside. I kind of wanted to nip it in the bud as quick as I could because my whole intent when I enlisted in the Marine Corps was to make a career out of it. I wanted to be a drill instructor. I wanted to become a scout sniper. I wanted to go to recon. I wanted to continue to escalate up the chain and keep doing as many hard things as I possibly could. But what ended up happening when I spoke with the psychiatrist after my last deployment, started getting put on a whole bunch of medications. And this was late 2006, early 2007. And I was on 7 different meds at one time. A couple of them had different dosages. And the Marine Corps ended up making the decision for me that they were going to medically retire me from service. And that was, dude, that was heartbreaking. And so that actually made things a lot worse in my life. And I started to drink more heavily. And I had this moment where I was hallucinating because I was on pills in my room by myself. My unit was getting ready to redeploy. I was short on time, so I could have extended for it. But once the psychiatrist made the decision to bed me out, like everything was out of my hands. And so I just drank, and I was hallucinating. And I remember just seeing all these crazy things in my room, and in the back of my mind, it was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I had my first suicide attempt in my barracks room. And there was a moment where I was looking down, and I saw the mess that I had made, and I realized what I had done. And I called up my corpsman buddy who was getting ready to get out, and I said, "Hey, dude, you got to come here." And he came over, opened up the door, saw what was going on, and kind of said, "Oh shit!" And he called his buddy. They came over and they started to stitch me up. And I remember, dude, I'll never forget this because I looked at the other corpsman and I said, "Well, aren't you gonna give me some Novocaine?" And he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Aren't you numb enough as it is?" And that was a moment
Damn.
of like of kind of, like just a snap to it moment. And at that point, I was like, I have to do something because I do want to have kids in the future. I do want to have a family. I do want to move beyond this moment. And I started spending time at the beach, and I got into meditation, and I learned about, I mean, I'm a pretty crunchy dude at heart, but I started looking into Reiki and like all these different modalities and methods for healing the mind and the body and the spirit in order to become whole again. And that was one of the most important things I could have done, because I had this thing, this, water is creation, it's life, right? And so I would go and I'd spend time on the beach, and I would just quiet myself, and I just breathe with the ocean. And I found that the more I did that, the more time would pass, and it would only feel like a snap of a finger, but the emotions that I was feeling would begin to dissolve and dissipate. Um, and I recognized that. And so that was a saving grace, man, because had I not found the meditation and the ocean afterwards, I really probably wouldn't have been here. Because I from that point started to get clean, get sober as much as I could. And I definitely struggled with it years past and up until like the last year and a half with alcohol. But that was the moment where I recognized I needed to do something else, or else I wasn't going to be around.
Yeah.
And nature helped it.
Yeah. Um, it's kind of, I don't want to say eerie, but like there's these things in people. Either something we say aloud that we haven't heard ourselves say, or it's something like so like that corpsman that said, "Aren't you numb enough?" Like
Yeah,
that's something that he probably said, but didn't even think back like to it again, right? But like for you,
yeah,
it just resonated differently, right? It said something to you that kind of clicked, as you said. Um, I remember the first
dude, that was
time.
18 years ago. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that
No,
was a
you're
moment
good.
18 years ago, and it's still vivid. I could still hear his tone, everything, and that was something that really resonated and still does to this day. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but you're right, man. That was a poignant moment.
Yeah, and no, you're good, man. This is a two-way conversation. You can ask questions too. It's like back and forth. But yeah, and I'm not trying to make it about me, but I'm really what I'm trying to do is draw the parallels, right? Because
Yeah,
I remember once when started to go seek therapy, I had one, and he wasn't. I think he was the type of therapist that I needed, right? But at the same time, like I wasn't ready to hear some of the shit that he said.
yeah.
And then one of them, I was telling him about a couple of injuries that I've had due to alcohol, right? And he just blatantly told me like, shouldn't you stop drinking? You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
try something different. And pretty much what he was trying to say. That's not what I heard. But at the same time, like, I still didn't listen to that, and because I failed to heed that warning, right, and those other warnings from all those experiences that kind of led me to that point,
it led to like another attempt, right? And
Yeah.
it's interesting how our whether you want to call it like still small voice or our intuition or consciousness, like or not consciousness, but our conscious will tell us what we need to do, but we do not, like, I don't know. For me, I'll just speak for myself. We're just so stubborn that we
Yeah.
just ignore it, and then we just find ourselves in a more hairy situation or a shittier situation because we're too proud or whatever that case may be. Um,
Sure.
but
Well, there's comfort, dude. There's comfort in misery, either by yourself or with another person, and how many times have we enabled other people to continue on with unhealthy lifestyles, and that just, we feed off of each other, man. Calm breeds calm, but chaos also breeds chaos. And I think at some point we have to be willing, hopefully we have that moment of just like speaking to us that we can embrace and say, hey, I love this dude, but spending time with this individual is bringing me down, and there's nothing that I can do to help this person, but I know I can help myself, and maybe in time that will be leading by example. I don't know, man. That's a hard pill to swallow. I remember a post that you put on Instagram a couple months back of talking about suicide, and that was really impactful. I think, and it just goes to show you that regardless as to who we are as individuals, what our life experiences or what we did within the military, that we have these common bonds, and sometimes it's through triumph and sometimes it's through tragedy.
mhm.
And so I was able to relate with what you were speaking on in that post, and I think that that's something that needs to be heard, man. Too many people are suffering, and it doesn't have to be that way. And sometimes we do need to grow up and like take ownership and responsibility for our lives if we want to continue forward.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, and it's all about being in a place to hear it, right? And then to
For sure.
make the decision to make those changes, right? And it's like to, I remember I was listening to a podcast with CT Fletcher. He's a bodybuilder. I don't know if you know who he is, but I remember he said something about like putting boundaries. It's pretty much what he's saying. I'm probably gonna jack up how he said it,
Yeah.
but the the
Yep.
the line I got from that was sometimes you have to keep, like, just kind of keep certain people at a distance, right? And it's because
Yep.
like you're not in a place to help them and vice versa, right? Or they're not in a place to listen. But at the same time, it's also like, it's like he said something like, we can be friends, but like, or family, whatever. But I'll just see you across the street. It's like not like
Yep.
completely cutting them off, but at the same time, you need to kind of save your space because we are what we consume, and that's on various levels. And yeah, going back to that post, it's interesting how things will just come up out of nowhere and just kind of slap you in the face, and it's just
Yeah,
this
dude.
emotion or something you wake up from, and you won't recall a dream or a nightmare or these things, but it's like your body remembers, not like, but your body remembers whatever. And then
Yep.
I kind of started to, because I do not remember dates, right? I do, like when my mom passed, or all these like tragic things have happened to me somehow, some way. My brain just doesn't remember the dates. It doesn't, like, I
Huh.
can't remember the date, or like I can remember like smells and things like that. But I don't know. It's
Yeah, yeah,
something
yeah.
that I've always done to compartmentalize. Maybe as a kid I learned that. I'm not really sure. But I kind of started going back and like what happened around this time, like last year or whatever, and it was like around my attempt, right? It was leading up to my attempt or around the attempt. The only reason I remember it is because I still have the bracelet when I went into inpatient, and I thought about getting rid of that, right? But at the same time, it's also like a reminder, right? Like of like this is where you were, like, so don't start backsliding and find yourself there again. You know what I mean? Because
Sure.
it's a slippery
Absolutely.
slope, man.
It is, dude. And I think that once you've been down that path, I mean, that's a vortex that can pull you in really quickly. And I think the closer you've gotten to the point of no return, the easier it is to get back, but then also the easier it is to stay away from it because you know what it's capable of doing. And really that just comes down to making sure you have healthy habits in place. And I hate to say trigger, but you know what the triggers are in order for you to recognize the patterns and step back and take that breath of fresh air.
Right, definitely. So when you said it was a tough pill to swallow, and again, like I draw a parallel with that because I was forced out of the service almost before my 20, and that was a bitch because one, I wasn't in trouble. I voluntarily want to go get help, right? And
Yeah.
my leadership wouldn't have known shit if I didn't say anything, right? But through because I didn't, there wasn't a place on base. I had to get. There wasn't a psychiatrist on base to prescribe meds, so they sent me to the VA, and the VA and I was actually in at Hanscom, which is not too far
Oh,
from me.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. We used to go bowling there when I was a kid. My dad was stationed up at Westover, and so we
Nice.
would go up to Hanscom.
Yeah, so I went to. They sent me to Bedford, the VA in Bedford, and so they
Yep.
started. I started seeking treatment there. That's where I was diagnosed with PTSD and all these things, right? But so the systems didn't speak to each other, so they prescribed me a med that on active duty is like on the naughty list, right? So it
Oh
automatically
no.
triggered a med board, and I didn't know that, right? And then so either way, it triggered a med board, and then before you knew it, I was going through the med board process, and it just I didn't realize it until afterwards, but I felt like I felt betrayed, you know? Like I
Yeah,
was at
I
about
hear you.
19 years or so. And the Air Force is the only one, unless they change the DoD reg, that can push you out at 19 years, 11 months, and 30 days or whatever. And you, like, before you're 20. Like, there's a sanctuary law with the Army, because I know, because I looked it up. Army, Marines, and Navy. Well, the Navy, Marines fall under the Navy. But either way, yeah, so they have a sanctuary law. So after 18 years, you can pretty much, I mean, as long as you don't fucking punch the general or whatever, like, something bad, like, they can,
Yeah.
you'll get your 20. But having said all that, um, like, what was that like? And then on top of that, like, what was that transition like? And like, I guess in hindsight, would you agree with, like, if you were in charge, would you make the same decision for you?
Man. Um, I at the time it was heartbreaking. It really was. Um, and I probably could have fought it, but at the time, dude, those medications had me all over the place, and it was really hard to think and to kind of keep a clear head. Looking back at it now, I still I still miss it, you know. Um, and I was bitter about that for a long time, But I also understand that had I stayed in, I likely wouldn't have met my wife. Um, I would have continued to deploy because I was a grunt, and that's what I loved doing. I loved being in the field. I loved deploying. That wasn't an issue for me, um, and I probably wouldn't be where I am today. Uh, and so I'm grateful for that. But looking back at it, that transition process, as difficult as it was, I wouldn't change because it really forced me to kind of come into myself. It really forced me to take ownership of my life, and it's been a long process, dude. Um, every day, I still have to find something to kind of move through, and that's just the way life is in general. But with the veteran community and the first responder community, I think it's a little bit more exponential. Um, but at that time, being 21, 22 years old, I was also going through a divorce.
Mm.
I had like the contract marriage thing going, and that was ending very quickly. And so that was just icing on the cake. But I wouldn't change any of that. That transition process, as difficult as it was quite a blessing. And coming up to Vermont, like there's a small group of veterans up here. Most of them were in the invasion in the army, and we kept to ourselves, and we drank a lot, sure, but we helped each other through it as best as we could, and that led to incredible things in my life. So as difficult as it was, I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah, and it's I mean, thanks for sharing that, but it is it it is strange how you said on something earlier, like, I think you said something like along the lines of like misery loves company, but it's also
Yeah,
like that transition, and that's kind of like you're going like full circle, right, with the
yep,
process of that, and it's strange to like question everything you're going through, right? Like, why is this happening?
Sure.
What the fuck? Blah blah blah, right? And you put in your expletive, and but to kind of go full circle and then look back at it and be like, damn, I'm glad that happened, right? I'm glad that because look where I'm at now, right? And it give you this newfound perspective of and direction of your life, right?
Absolutely. But, I also recognize that I was very fortunate to have found a small group of individuals up here in Vermont, um, and to find a path forward. I've had 25 dudes from my unit end their own lives, either through
Fuck.
direct means or through like overdose. And the first one actually was when we were in Iraq in 2005. This dude blew his brains out in a Porsche. And I remember hearing the call, and we ended up going to that location right afterwards. And the sergeant major was there, and he was just, there was all sorts of expletives coming out of his mouth. But um, that was a tough pill to swallow, because that was kind of like the legacy that was being paved for my unit. Um, in the last week, I've actually met up with two dudes from my unit. One was in my platoon. We transitioned, and I haven't seen this guy in like 17 years, but he lives up here near me. We were training jujitsu, and so we got to get some rolls on and talk about the unit and all that stuff. And it was just interesting because he had the same things in the back of his mind. He's doing all right for himself right now. He's got a family. He's doing stuff with one of the colleges around here, contracting, and he's doing all right. But his concern, as was the other guy that I saw the other day, is that so many dudes are just checking out because they don't have that path forward, and they become that statistic. And I think it's really unfortunate, and I've questioned so many times, just like, why do I keep living? Why do I keep surviving? Why did I not get shot, or did that shrapnel sever my carotid or whatever when I was overseas? And why have I survived as many times as I have here once I got out of the military? And I don't have a question, and a spiritual person can say, well, God has plans in store for you. And I wouldn't disagree with them. But I think about like some of the people who died who had families, and it's heartbreaking to think that they don't have that support network. Their families probably don't have that support network. And, and so I think for me, in order to continue moving forward, it's really about recognizing, I don't want to say like the sacrifice that they made, but those work, and to honor them by living by example, by living with intention, by living to do right by my community, which wherever that may be.
Yeah, and it's and I think that's part of the process, right? Like, is to understand like your purpose and like there's almost like a bit of survivor guilt with it, right? Like, and then it's trying to understand
Yeah,
like
for sure.
why this is happening, like, and that's kind of what I'm finding in myself, right? It's like looking at all these aspects of experiences, traumas, whether childhood or through the military or what have you, and like really trying to understand and like the bigger picture. At least
Yep.
that's kind of my thing. It's like diving deep and like, and there's all these. The military is a microcosm of our society, and then like pharmaceuticals and like all these different aspects that kind of factor into the like all these symptoms, right? Of everything, but it's like trying to remove myself from that thought and instead of chasing the flares of it, you know what I mean? It's like, all right,
Yeah.
what's the bigger picture, right? To understand for myself, because part of that is like understanding like that and understanding that everything is not in my control, and then like
Yep.
what is the bigger picture and understand the bigger picture in various ways. And some of that, it's I've kind of gone through similar methods, meditation, and I still use a lot of these practices, right? In the military they talk about put in your toolbox, right, for leadership.
Yep.
uh, and that's one of those things. It's not like just grabbing onto one, right? So I use some meditation, just kind of been diving down deep into different religions, and I kind of been doing that for a while because that's part of my
Yep.
childhood, right? And it's like understanding why I see the world the way I do, and then where I lost that anchor point, right? Because I do know one thing: there is good and evil in the world, right? That's
Sure.
that's constant for me. At least that's what I've experienced and that's what I've seen. And with that, it's also like, all right, well, if I know those two things are constant, and then you can talk about Taoism, like the yin and yang, and all these different things. There's different methodology and understandings of these bigger pictures, but it's kind of like, you know, whittling that down to like yourself, right? And like how you move through your life with your family and your friends, and it's just really trying to, and it seems like you're doing that, right? It seems, not seems, but you are doing that based off of what I see on there. Like it's kind of getting back to your roots. It's
Yeah, man.
like putting in the practices, and then at the same time, one thing I didn't expect in this life was one, to be riding mountain bikes, and two, like especially post
Yeah.
retirement, like to be helping others. And I didn't realize, because like in the military, and sorry, I'm not trying to make it all about me, and I'm kind of going somewhere with
No,
this.
you're good, dude.
In the military, like, I mean, I served like 20, right? But there was always, at least in the Air Force, there was like this for bullets, right? For EPRs, it's like, you know, you got to volunteer. And I was never like the type to like, I want to volunteer for a bullet. Like I want to like I want to do something and my heart be in it. And but I just never really found that thing, right?
Yeah,
But fast forward, now I understand like why people well, why some people volunteer and like try to help others, because it does start to heal you in whatever way, in ways that you didn't expect. So
for sure, man. And
go
I
ahead.
think that no, I think that you're onto something, man, because like we have to approach life from this multifaceted perspective, whether that is a way to achieve an objective or to find our own spirituality or our healthy daily practices, whatever it is, like it has to be multifaceted. And one of the examples that I give when I'm teaching food systems at the farm to students is that nothing in this world grows by itself or in a straight line. And so we shouldn't be recreating those things on such a large scale. And what that boils down to is we have to be able to look at things to diversify them in such a way that if one fails, the other one will pick up. If that fails, the other one will pick up. So that way we don't become dependent on one specific thing. And that is resilience. That's knowing that if you go out on a trail and you're riding and you're riding and you're riding, and then that's your life, right? But say you have a sprained knee or an ankle or whatever, and you can't ride for a couple weeks because you needed to rest, like what's going to fill in that void that's there because you can't do that thing that you love doing. And it's taken a long time, dude. And I've definitely had those voids last longer than what I want to have had them last. And I'm sure you've been in the same boat, but we have to look at life from multiple angles. We have to look at healing from multiple angles because that's the only way that we're going to be able to exist and to live you know. And so I got a question for you. You had asked earlier about what was the point that made me want to get back to nature, and you just mentioned that you never anticipated riding mountain bikes and helping people. Like, what was the point where you said this is a good idea, and I want to continue to pursue this?
So yeah, um, it's interesting how things work, and that's kind of where I factor in. Like I go off a lot of, and I'm getting more confidence as I say this, right? Because of the amount of research I've done with myself, as well as like just different understandings, different modalities, philosophies, etc. But I do follow into my intuition quite a bit. You know, it's strange how I'll, not strange, but I'll meet somebody and there's something about them. You're one of them, right? There's like I have a natural pull towards, right? And then I'll bring them on the podcast or what have you, because I feel like there's going to be like there's something there, right? There's something there that is more than whatever it is, that these superficial kind of interactions that we have, right? Not you and
Yeah,
I, but just in general.
yeah, I got you.
But one of those things was when I was in Germany, when I was stationed in Germany, my one of my bosses invited me to go to mountain biking, right? And I went a few times, and most of the time I was fucking hungover. You know, I would go, but I remember how great I felt afterwards, right? And but I would just pass out. You know, it was usually on the weekend. I would pass out. You know, like after the ride. But I just remember how like how much fun I had. Right. Fast forward like what that was like in 2000. So I got there in '09. I've left in 2011, I think, or so. Um, so I didn't ride again till um, 20, 2018 after I retired. I just, again, intuition, right? And it was also at the same time, like,
Yeah.
I had put drinking to the side. You know, I was just like, this is, this didn't serve me, right? And there was multiple
Yep.
times where either injuries or something kind of resulted from drinking or fights or whatever, right? And so I decided like when I went in inpatient, I'm gonna put this to the side. And then so when I got out, right, and I got out of the military, I came back home. I was like, and one that was foreign, right? Like I'm back home, but I don't feel like I'm home. Like
Yeah.
I forget that I'm home. Like I forget my family's here, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I have to actively, consciously, and that's one of my goals this year is to like like schedule time with them, right? But
Yeah, man. You
having
have
said,
to.
yeah, having said all that, right? I bought a mountain bike on a whim. You know, I just went to. I was like, you know, and it was really grasping at a straw, right? Like I'm coming out of the darkness. I'm not trying to be so dramatic about that, but that's really what it was. What am I going to do to kind of help me get my balance, if you will? Like try to do
Yep.
something, a positive coping mechanism, right? And that was buying a mountain bike, and that was the most I've ever spent on a bike. I've talked about this before. It was like I want to say it was like $1,600. I got a narco fluid hardtail, and I remember
Yep.
walking in there. I was like asking the bike shop, like, "Hey, I want something I could ride on the road and ride on the trail if I need to." And they're like, well, and looking back, that's kind of a stupid thing. It's like, well, you can technically ride both of these, but whatever. But that's really what it was. I didn't want anything to do with the military at the time, because I was kind of
Yep.
jaded from everything that happened. Um, and I just I bought a mountain bike, right? And I didn't even tell my wife, not that I had to, but you know, that's just kind of one of those things you talk about, right? You're gonna drop 1,600 bucks on a bike, you know, and of
Yeah, it's
course,
not nothing.
yeah, that's not nothing, you know what I mean? So and I just started riding on my own, right? I just started riding the trails, and I didn't. I'm from San Antonio. I didn't even know there were trails here, if that makes sense. Like I was never exposed to that as a kid. I grew up
Yeah.
in you know, kind of in a rough neighborhood, right? And the most riding I got was in the street, jumping like fucking random shit, like you know, trash they throw
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
across
Yeah.
the street. Like I learned sheetrock, you don't jump that. That's not gonna
No.
work. But it's just like I mean, with my Huffy or whatever. And then fast forward, like yeah, so I just started riding on the trails, and I started kind of exploring that, and it happened in reverse for me. I and it's interesting how, and I have no other way to describe it other than like, and I'm not trying to sound too dramatic on this or anything, but it was like it's like maybe it was all the prayers my aunts and my mom and everyone did for me. That good intention, right? Because that's one thing I'm learning going back to water, right? Intent.
Yep.
You know how it changes the molecules of the water. You know, like you know, jealousy, anger. Are you tracking what I'm talking about? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a really good book about that.
Okay. Is it Masuro Emoto's book or somebody
Yeah. Yeah.
else's?
Yeah. Was it like the hidden meaning of water, where they look at the actual crystalline formation
Hell yeah.
depending on energy that's going into it and how it changes the formation?
Yeah. So I mean, and I think that's why prayer. Well, I'm going off track. We can. Um,
No, dude, it's good.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I do really feel that like that intent you put. You know, whether it does transfer, right? Because we are water. Um, but either way, because it's like interesting how all these things fell in line. So much so I was like starting to kind of be like a little paranoid, you know, just like why, like, because coming out of that place, right? You're like, I didn't feel deserving of it, and I still don't feel deserving of it in a lot of ways, right? Whether
Yeah.
that's imposter syndrome or whatever the case may be. But it's interesting to kind of just find yourself in a place just by happenstance, right?
Yep.
And so I started writing, and I started getting connected with nature. I was still on medication. I was fucking 8, 9 pills, right? Prazosin and all kinds of,
Man.
you know, you fucking name it. I was on it, and but slowly it's almost like nature started to allow me to ask the questions like, do I still need this medicine? Where am I at? Like, what is my baseline anymore? Like, I don't feel
Yep.
anything. When my mom passed, like, I, I was fucking numb. My brother, that's one of those things where when people tell you something, it's like he told me, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years afterwards, he was just like, I saw you, dude. And he's like, that's not my brother. He said he told one of my cousins or something. And I was like, that kind of
Okay.
hurt, right? But at the same time, it's something real, right? That it's a data point, right, to understand where you were at. But at the same time, I look back like, no, I wasn't. Like I was just fucking like operation mode, like I'm here,
Yep.
I'm on leave, I got to deal with this, and then help whenever way I can, process it and fucking move on, right? And
Yep.
but either way, like it started to slowly like unfold and allow me the space to, and I think also retiring allowed me that space too. Like, the mission was taken away. The understanding that the shit's gonna get done with you, with or without you, regardless if you're there. And then that was kind of a hard pill to swallow because you feel like I need to be there to do this thing. If not, it's not gonna
Yep.
happen. And then when you realize it doesn't matter, they're gonna replace you right away. That's a whole different thing. But it just slowly started to unfold, and that doing those things and pushing through, like making the decision to get out of bed and go outside regardless of the elements, right? And start to
Yep.
kind of put yourself in nature. And that's not something I went in with the intent to do. It's just the result of it. It started putting me in communities, or a community of mountain bikers, and they just happen to be veterans. The more I try to push away, the more I found them. I mean,
Yeah, man.
I chose the wrong fucking city to try to retire in. I mean, get away from the military. But
Dude, you're surrounded.
yeah, and so every time I kind of went on the trails, I kind of just started talking to folks, and that started to slowly kind of give me back a tribe, right, if you will. It was a commonality of mountain biking. And then that opportunity led to another veteran, which I was selling tires to. And I didn't need these tires. I sold them to him in a Walgreens parking lot. And it was supposed to be like a 15-minute exchange. It turned into like fucking 3 or 4 hours. We're talking. And, but that led me into, meeting Jonathan from the Dirt Therapy Project, the founder of the Dirt Therapy Project. And I got invited. I didn't even know it was a nonprofit because I probably wouldn't have went, because I talk about this
Yeah.
often too. We minimize our traumas or life experiences, our military experiences, because we're not the other guy that had it worse. We're not the other person. So again, that's a different tangent. But um, if I would have known if it was not, I wouldn't have gone. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
But I went. I just thought it was a couple guys that were vets that were gonna go riding in Bentonville, Arkansas. I didn't know where the fuck that was at. But we went, and the next day we Jonathan and I were talking at a cafe. And I kind of told him a little bit about my attempt and how riding has kind of benefited me in the way that it has up until that point. I was kind of on that mountain biking stoke at that time, right? It was this new
Yep.
thing that kind of gave me purpose and a like an understanding of like, man, I could be good at something again, right? I can
Yeah, for
do
sure.
this thing and be good. And athletically, I thought my days were over. Like football days were over, and like baseball, all these things, right, that I played. But with that, it also, I was explaining to Jonathan, and he was just like, I was like, I'm thinking about starting a nonprofit or something. And he was like, well, that's what I'm doing. And I was like, well, I do anything I can to support your efforts, because honestly, I don't think I have the attention span to even go through the paperwork to fucking start a nonprofit. If I'm being honest, right?
Yeah, dude, I hear you. I hear
So
you.
that's kind of where it led me, right? And everything was in reverse. Like I joined, like I was like, I'll support in whatever way that is. I got invited to more trips. Let me get back by getting a GoPro and just recording, because I can't get back monetarily right now, but I can give you my time and help
Yep.
out in whatever way, whether it be cooking, whatever it takes, right? I'll try to give back. And fast forward 5 6 years, like, it's grown. And with that, I've kind of realized that helping others is helping myself, you know, because it gives me their experiences, gives me a different appreciation, as well as this
Excuse me.
podcast of and parallels. And the more I understand others, the more I understand myself, and vice versa. So hopefully I answered your question. It might have been a little bit too much.
No, dude, it's good. I think that the work that you're doing is super important, man. And it all goes back to taking that multifaceted approach. But the other side to it, and you alluded to it when you were in Germany, you might have still been drinking and on pills, but like you were going out, you were breathing fresh air, you were getting your cardiovascular system going, you were getting your muscles filled with oxygenated air, blood. And dude, that's important. And so sometimes it's just those little baby steps that can make the drastic changes within our lives later on down the line. Our culture is so built around getting everything when we want it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not really how things work. And our bodies being a really good example of that. If you try to deadlift 405 and you're 135 pounds, you've never been to the gym, you're going to hurt yourself, but you
Mm-hmm.
can build up to that, right? And so, like these therapies, the modalities, it's the same way, man. You got to habitualize yourself. You got to take those baby steps to get into it. And it's not to say that you're not going to take steps back, because for sure you will. You talked about emotions kind of coming out of nowhere sometimes, and that's always going to be there. But what is going to change is your reaction, my reaction, anyone's reaction to those emotions, and that is the resilience piece, right? That is the forward motion. That's not being suppressed by old narratives. That's moving beyond it by understanding it a little bit differently.
Yeah, definitely, and that definitely comes with like experience, and then also like I used to hear often early on like doing the work, right? But that's what it is, like, and it's also understanding like we can do all these, we can take all these medicines, right? Whether it's plant medicine or pharmaceuticals in like the right with the right settings and all these things, right?
Yep.
But at the end of the day, like we still have to do the work, right? We have to apply all those
Yeah.
skills, right? We even if we
Yeah, dude, no one's going to do it for
yeah,
you.
you can learn. Yeah, I think that's a misconception too. Is people will go do ayahuasca or weed, whatever, right? Whatever is they think it works for them or has helped them process whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like it's not a fix all. It's just to show you
Nope.
something about yourself, and then it's up to you to kind of carry that out and make the changes.
Yeah, man, if you're not making lifestyle changes and you're continuing to do the same thing that put you into the position of where you went to go to whatever treatment you're going to do, like it's kind of a waste of time. And from my opinion, I think that if you're going to invest in your future, you have to be willing to make those changes, and you have to be willing to do it yourself, because you can have friends that'll show up and they might give you the tough love, they might give you the compassion, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, man, it's you and yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be willing to embrace that and to go forward from there.
Right. No, I agree with you 100%. So, what do you do? You talk about multifaceted. I'm a huge believer in that. Like, I call it like, don't be one dimensional, right?
Yep.
Because whenever you don't have that one thing that brings you joy, kind of mountain biking, that's kind of what brought it
Yep.
for me, an injury. Like what? So how do you? What are the other things that you do to kind of have in your quiver to kind of keep everything stabilized?
um I mean, fitness is a really important part of my life, and it was lacking for a little while. I never got like out of shape, but I wasn't going to the gym. I wasn't going on rocks or runs or anything like that. I'd go out and I'd hike. I'd go and I'd ride my bike, but it wasn't with the intent of improving the quality of my body and my mind. It was just kind of recreational. I think that back in 2019, I started to get back into fitness, like actually taking it seriously, similar to how I did in the service, you know. Um, and I recognized that by going to the gym and lifting weights traditionally, I was getting hurt a lot more frequently.
Mm.
And I didn't want that to happen. My body was pretty jacked up for a very, very long time, and it still is. But by going to chiropractic and going to acupuncture, I was able to recognize some different patterns, and I was able to like hear the advice that was being shared. Um, and that forced me to look at things that would allow me to get strong, to stay fit, to stay healthy, but then to also not be injured or as injured in the process. And so that he was competing in the tactical games, which for those who are unfamiliar, it's a two-gun competition where you're wearing your plate carriers, you're kitted up, you're running around, you're doing CrossFitty things, and then you're shooting to be proficient and accurate. And that to me looked really fun. What ended up happening from that is was actually quite an emotional thing because that was the first time I had worn kit since I was in Ramadi. And so I got to reassociate myself with the guns, with the plate carriers, with all the gear. And I noticed like this catharsis that occurred from it. And so to be good at that, you have to be able to, you know, have a good heart and lungs. And so I started training that way. And then I recognized how much I loved running. And then I saw, okay, well, I can bike with this too, and that'll improve my cardiovascular system and my lung capacity. And then it's just like, okay, so I could start rucking. And it just kind of, it happened organically where there's this one specific thing that I, and I, all these other things, I would just actually like cycle through that for seasons. And so I can't do mountain biking all year round. I mean, you can if you have a fat bike, but I don't have. So I would do skiing and not like traditional downhill, but more of like an AT setup where you're wearing skins on the bottom of your skis and you're climbing and you're earning your turns essentially. And so I was able to get involved with all these other fitness activities, where if one of my body parts was hurting, I could likely go to another one, and I can still fill the gap of feeling strong and fulfilled, like I was doing something right, and not be so concerned, even though I might want to do this other thing a little bit more. So it really did just happen organically. But the other side of that is, you know, we run a homestead. And so part of that is growing our food. And growing food really is hard on your body. You're bent over a lot, you're squatting a lot, you're up and down. It's hard on your joints, you're moving things, you're twisting, you're pulling. And so the fitness side of things also was important for that as well. Um, you know, it's really difficult when you're trying to do a specific task on the farm and you can't because the impingement in your arm is so bad that you can't move it, you know. And I didn't want to get to that point or stay at that point longer than what I had. And so that brought in more physical therapy, and really just like being willing and open to look at these different um, healing methods, because what important to me is living.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for me to live, I need to grow food. I need to stay fit. I need to engage with my family. And so it really was just kind of finding anything possible that would allow me to continue to do the thing, which was life, is life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Yeah,
if that answers your question, but it just kind of, it's something that happened organically.
yeah, and yeah, it did. It did. Yeah, it definitely did. I'm just one of my the things I try to work through is like I'm processing everything you're saying, and then sometimes I kind of sit on it for a little bit. But was there ever a point where you had to uh, work through the idea of getting better?
Yeah. So in 2018, my dad died. And that was something that was really difficult for me because we didn't have the best relationship.
Mm,
There were parts of it that were really good, and there were parts of it that when he died, I was just pissed at him for dying because it's like I felt unsettled, um,
mm,
and I had to forgive him, and in order to do that, I had to kind of like look at the entirety of our relationship, you know, the positions that he was in, how he was raised, um, and kind of forgive him and then forgive myself in that process. And so last year, I actually went through the Heroes and Horses program out in Montana. And for those unfamiliar, that's a 41-day intensive program where 8 men per class, they go, they learn horsemanship. They learn about nutrition, breath work, meditation, yoga, fitness, doing hard work, kind of beating addictions and all that stuff. And it's a very rigorous program. And what I took away from that was the importance of individual wanting to get better. And part of that came from there was a moment where we were down on a ranch in Nevada, and on one of the days we had to brand cattle, and so we branded, I think, like 472 calves that day, and at the end of it, my horse, he had been in the sun all day. It was relatively hot, and I brought him.
So we just lost John right now. We're trying to get him reconnected, but it's unfortunate because we were getting in a pretty good conversation. I'm pretty sure you guys could see and feel like where we're going with this. And the goal of this podcast is to put our stories out there, our experiences, I should say, and with the hopes of them resonating with whoever may be listening, um, because it's important. Like one of the things that we've lost in the society is storytelling. And granted, there are a lot of podcasts and things that you can listen to that possibly help you in whatever way. And I think we're getting John back on right now. Let's see if, or at least he cut out, so he might be coming back in.
Yeah. So when I was going through the program, we ended up down at a ranch in Nevada, and we branded about 470 calves that morning. And it was a hot day, and by the end of it, everyone was just totally smoked. Animals, humans, everyone. Um, and I remember bringing my horse to the water, and in the back, and he didn't drink it. In the back of my mind, it was like, oh, so that saying is true. You can bring the horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. And I think that is a great metaphor towards us as humans. Like, if you're not willing to make the change, you're not going to. And I've always been willing to make the change. And so um, during that program at Heroes and Horses, I was reminded of all the things that were really important to me: the yoga, the meditation, the nutrition, um, good sleep cycles, uh, everything that we need as humans in order to function properly. And so that was actually like a pivotal moment for me, because I was able to forgive my dad. I was able to forgive myself, and I was able to go back into that headspace of where I wanted to be, where I needed to be, and reintroduced all of these methods back into my life. And those were really lost after my dad died, because I didn't. I felt almost like defeated in a way. Um, and I really stopped caring about a lot of things after he had died. It just comes willing to sit with ourselves and say, hey, I gave my best effort to move through this day, or I didn't. And if you didn't, you can make changes. And if you did, then you know that you're going to have to do the same thing again. So, um, yeah, man, we as individuals need to be willing to make that change, that shift. And it's not going to come from someone else.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And it's funny you use that phrase or that, because my mom used to tell me that all the time. Like, you can take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So I say it often, and it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never experienced uh taking a horse to water, literally, but uh, there is a ranch here. It's called Rustic Ranch, Texas. We've been helping them. Actually, founded by a Marine vet, Nina Guerra, and we had her on the podcast, or I had her. I don't want to keep saying we, but I had her on the podcast, and she's doing the same thing. It's equine assisted therapy, and
Awesome.
I've been helping there, right? And I really enjoy doing that, kind of going out there and but one of the things, the opportunities that was provided last year was they were doing like a film there, and they kind of gave me like a crash course on how to ride a horse, you know. I rode a
Yeah,
horse
man.
when I was younger, and I did it with basketball shorts, which I recommend never doing. Like, yeah. So either way, but either like when I went into this kind of a little bit more prepared. But yes, I mean, just and it's that balance. That's one thing I kind of brief, like I don't want to say preach, but I brief a lot or I say a lot is balance, because you can't have too much force on a horse because you're just going to resist. And at least
Yeah.
that's my experience. And you can't have too little force because it's not going to listen. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
just like, so it's like having that mutual understanding of one another, and just understand, like, and it's humbling too, because I mean, this animal, this being is huge. It just knock your ass off if it wants to, you know what I mean? But
Yep.
yeah, so it's just like trying to understand, like it's not gonna accept you if you're not in a place, like if you're like super anxious or whatever, you can't just jump on a horse because it's gonna be like, get off me. Like that energy is not in line with whatever I want on top of me, and vice versa, right? You're not gonna jump on a horse that's agitated, you know? I mean, unless you have the experience to break in a horse. I was reading, have you read Empire of the Summer Moon? Rise and Fall of the
Parts of it. I
Comanche?
haven't. I have. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've read through parts of it. That book's actually been on my mind the last month. I was trying to find it in the airport when I was on my way out to see you guys, and they didn't have it at the bookstore that I went to,
Okay. Well, there's a part where it
unfortunately.
talks about the Comanches and how they used to, um, when they used to break horses, they would, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's just the reality of it. I'm not gonna try to apologize for,
No need to, man.
a different time, right? So they used to, like, if I remember correctly, they would like strangle the horse almost to near death, and then once the horse would give in, they would let him go and then breathe into their nose, and then from that point on, like
Yep.
the horse knew, you know, like where each other were at. There was this mutual understanding. Like, I almost took your life, but I saved it, and yeah, now you know what I mean. Uh,
Yeah,
so
dude. I mean, and horses are incredible creatures, dude. I had spent a lot of time mucking stalls and just being around them and grooming them, but had only very limited experience riding them. And what's cool about this program is that you can take individuals who've never been around a horse at all, period, and by the end of it, you're on an 11-day pack trip in the middle of nowhere.
whoa,
Sustaining yourself, bringing mules out, um, and it's really incredible, dude. So my horse, he was a Mustang. Most of the horses that are part of this program, they were Mustangs. They were wild at one point. And dude, he was just an incredible creature. And we had some really incredible connections over the duration of my time with this program. Um, and there's a lot of frustrations that come with that because, like you said, dude, like it's they are so sensitive that they can feel a person's energy from about 4 feet away, right? And so if you go into your interactions with this creature tense and anxious, it's going to pick up on that and it's going to react to it. And so this goes back to calm breeds calm. So you have to be willing to really, like, truly go as deep into your heart space as you can and just chill out and recognize that this is a massive prey animal that can stomp you and hurt you or worse, and it's going to see you as a predator until you give it a reason uh, to not be one, essentially. And so as
right,
you build your relationship with these creatures, man, they're just a mirror, because once they recognize that you're not going to hurt them, they look to you to be a leader, and they will push your buttons and they'll push boundaries and figure out what they can get away with, and they do that quite well, and that forces you to focus on your breath, to focus on recentering and aligning yourself, so that way you're calm and you have the ability to communicate with this creature on multiple levels. And by the end of it, dude, most folks, man, they're just steering this horse by looking the direction and moving your one hand in and out. And that's a really powerful thing to watch men who have been through so much throughout their military careers or throughout their life, to be completely scared of getting on a horse, that by the end of the program they're navigating through really treacherous terrain, hauling mules behind them, living off these animals for 10, 11 days. and doing so with such grace. And it's really a powerful tool. And you see the confidence that builds up in these men, and you who they truly are.
Yeah. I lost you there for a bit, but I think we got the gist of it. Like just the full circle, right? Going in, not understanding what you're getting into. Probably never been around a horse. I mean, you probably get a guy from New York City and get him on a horse, and it's just like so foreign because they don't even seem like they don't even drive there. They just take the subway all the time. But and that's probably within that program, right? The people, the instructors, the coaches, or what have you, they see that full circle, right? And at the same time, it's just this reciprocal healing, right? They see you, and then it gives them purpose and understanding of what they're doing, their purpose to kind of keep them moving forward another step, or if you will. And
For
you
sure.
touched on one thing earlier, how you and I found myself in the same place a lot of times. I don't say a lot of times, sometimes, where you uh, question, right? Like why you're doing this, right? What you're doing, and like trying to one help yourself and at the same time help others. Because at times, like let's say you put a I don't know whatever message out there and it's not reciprocated, or it's maybe you try to help somebody and they don't react in the way that the expectation that you don't realize that you have, and maybe you're getting better with that as you kind of bring more people through the course or what have you. But like, how do you continually find that drive and not allow some of those things to creep in of what you're doing and why you're doing it?
Dude, that's a great question. Yeah, man, that's a great question. I actually had a moment last week. I don't remember the circumstance, but my wife and I were talking, and I told her that I have absolutely no power over this person's decision to act or react in a certain way. It is entirely on them. And she looked at me and she kind of like smirked, and she was like, oh, really? You felt that way? I was like, yeah. She was like, good job. I was like, okay, cool. Thank you. No, but I think that that's what we really um, have to be willing to do, is put our ego aside, because at the end of the day, I think that the majority of people who enlist or become officers within the military, or they volunteer their time, or they get paid as fire, EMS, or law enforcement, they do so because they really want to make change within the world. They want to change their communities for the greater good. They want to protect their communities and their families, and that's really noble. And I think that for us, when we get out and we're looking for our purpose, we want to change the things that are creating statistics. We want to help other people move forward. Um, and there's this drive that we, even if we've been doing it for a very long time, that we have the way for them to do so. But that might not be the best way for other individuals. And I think that's relative to what I'm trying to say, is that it doesn't matter how many people you reach out to. It doesn't matter how many people respond. If you are changing one life, great. And if that life is yours, great. Because if you're leading by example, eventually people will catch on. You know, I think that it's really important to understand that we have control over our lives and our lives only. As a parent, yeah, you have some control over your kids' lives, but you're also shaping and molding them to be adults, to be young men and women, as they grow older. And if we as individuals get caught up on not meeting our expectations, um, and we feel as though we failed, then we're just continuing to feed this narrative that we're not doing the right thing. And I've been in that position so many times where it's like, okay, I want this many people to show up for a workshop, and if they don't, then I've done something wrong. And that's really not the case, man, because I've learned that everyone who shows up for something, those are the people that need to be there. And in time, like, yeah, you might get bigger, whatever. But for me, if I have three people who are committed to the craft that I'm trying to teach them for like wilderness survival, that to me is more important than having a dozen and a half people who want to try the thing, but they're not really sure if they're going to like it, and they only put in half the effort, you know?
Mm,
Um, and so, really, for me, it's just about putting my ego aside, which absolutely is easier said than done most times, and being humbled and being willing to embrace humility, throughout every aspect of your day. Um, and so I know, like, I live with intention. I know when I'm not living in with intention. I know when I'm failing myself because I didn't want to do the uncomfortable thing versus leaning into the uncomfortable thing. I know that for myself. Not everyone knows that for themselves, and they have to find it in their own manner. But if I continue to lead by example, not because I want a like or a heart or a thumbs up on like a social post, but because I know that I truly wholeheartedly believe in it, then that, I believe, is what people will see.
mm.
I was inspired to live my life through a couple of Instagram posts, and that changed my life, and I saw that impact on my life. Um, and so I'm not trying to be an influencer by any means, but I'm just trying to be a wholesome, authentic human being to the best of my abilities, and hope that people will see that and react in a way that's relative to them. You know,
Mhm.
if and that's all I can do, man. That's all I can do. Is just be as authentic as I know myself to be, and if raise my own bullshit flag, take ownership and responsibility of my life, and clear the way and make the changes that are appropriate for me living an honest and earnest life.
And the more I find, like, if you push through whatever it is that you're going through and you go do that thing, I don't know, let's say somebody invites you to a barbecue and you don't want to go, right? Because you're like, your number one thing is avoidance, or one of the things you do is avoid.
Yeah.
But then you go, right? And you may, if you don't go, you're missing out on an opportunity, like a, whether a piece of wisdom, or at the same time, you may say something that might help somebody else. Um, but I do feel that that reciprocation of information, of sharing a story and experience, or just being a certain way, or carrying yourself a certain way, will resonate with others in a positive way. And it's like leading by example, right? And I when I first when I first got out of the military and I was just kind of like leaving a few different programs, I wanted to share this information, right, with everyone, and try to help people and try to reduce suicide and all these things. And
Yep.
then through time, through conversations with my wife and I, because she tries to do the same thing, she puts out a lot of information that to try to help others, right, giving people the tools. But at the end of the day, you can't take a horse to water and you can't make them drink, or you can take a horse to water and you can't make them drink. But with that, it's we learn through through the many conversations that we've had, whether trying to help family members or friends or what have you. It's like, just change yourself,
Yeah,
and
man.
then that will inspire others to do the same if they want to be a part of it, right? And also, like you said,
Yep.
don't, like, kind of cast your ego to side. Understand when your ego is, like, tripping you up, and just kind of try to let that go. Try to actively, and it's skill, right? It's a skill that you're trying to unlearn, like 30, 40 years, however old you are. And you know what I mean? You're trying to unlearn all
Yeah.
those
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
habits. And so it's a taking, like you said earlier, baby steps, taking each opportunity to, like, all right, shut up, ego. And I think ego is good in some cases. Ego can push you
Sure.
through stuff, but at the same time, it's like anything, it's on a spectrum, right? And it can either hurt you, it could hurt, it could help you or hurt you. So, I have a few questions that this is something new. Um,
Okay.
but I wanted to ask you, what fundamental principles do you believe are essential for mastering bushcraft beyond just survival techniques?
Shelter, water, fire. So, knowing how to get yourself out of the elements, knowing how to stay dry, knowing how to warm things out, knowing how to kind of just make sure that you can regulate your core body temperature, is all going to happen with shelter and fire, um, and water, depending. But um, that those three things are hands down going to be the most important. Water is important because we need it. We need it to drink, to provide nourishment. We need it to cook food with. We need it. We need it. You can't live without it. And then the fire is important because you have to treat water. You have to cook your food. You have to dry out your clothes. You have to stay warm. You have to fend off predators. You have to do all these things, and fire is really good for that. So if you can focus and hone in those three skills, um, you're already a step in the right direction. And how I teach courses, we take the crawl, walk, run approach, where I'll teach people different tarp configurations and different knots, how to work with more modern amenities. You know, not just tents, but like taking a small poncho, like a GI style poncho, and turning that into a shelter. A couple different configurations, which it's not going to be like the Ritz Carlton, but it's going to, provide provide a specific purpose. And if that's what will help you get through an unexpected night in the woods, awesome. And then as people kind of grasp onto that idea, we'll start to take away. They might have a bigger tarp or a poncho, then they have a smaller tarp and a poncho. Then they have to build a debris hut with cordage and then without cordage. And there's ways to do that, but essentially we start with all the amenities and then we take them away. And the same thing goes with fire. I teach a specific fire lay. It works in all conditions. And if you do it this way, it won't be an issue, even if the wood is really saturated. Okay. Um, Granted, you might have to work a little bit harder if the wood is saturated, but this fire lay works. And so I teach people how to do it with a lighter, and then how to do it with a ferrocerium rod, which is just a metal rod and a scraper that throws really hot sparks. And then we break it down and we take that away, and we give them like a piece of flint and steel, or we'll do other charred cloth with a ferro rod, or you can do it with gunpowder and like a bow drill and then a bow drill ember. So there's all these different methods. And that's going to allow you to treat your water and to stay warm and get dry. And so the same thing with water, show them how to procure it, how to treat it, how to carry it with you, how to find it. Um, and that's really it, man. Those three tasks though, you can fit in a small fanny pack and be able to sustain yourself for a night if you need to. It's not going to be the most comfortable, but it'll get you through. And that's really what we try to teach.
Nice. And those are like that was a quick response. Uh,
Yeah,
so
dude,
like
it's second nature, man. Like learn those three things: shelter, water, fire, and you'll be pretty good.
yeah, and it's you kind of hit it on it earlier too, and I agreed with a lot of you said because we talk about these things, and I don't know if it's just in the zeitgeist or but it's and especially with everything kind of going on in the world right now, but it's the death by convenience, right? It's like
Yeah.
boiling the water,
Yep.
boiling a frog. It's like slow, subtle, and before you know it, it's here. So with all the technologies and everything kind of existence, like it's gonna sound like a dumb question, but why should people know it with all these technologies kind of exist now?
Right. So, perfect example. A couple years back, we had a really bad ice storm. This was end of October, beginning of November. It was and we lost power for probably about 5 days. For us, like I've designed and built this house, so it can work off of pretty passive means. But when we lost power for 5 days, nothing really changed for us because I had all of my gear and my kit laid out. I knew that we could eat food. I knew that we could build fires. I knew that we would be warm for it. There was going to be a level of discomfort, but we would be warm. We wouldn't be freezing. And 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 that to me was a measure of success. I didn't have a backup generator, like plugging everything in so that way we could continue to live in convenience. And there's a time and a place for that, sure, but for us, like when the power goes out, I kind of get excited because that resorts to us having to rely on candles and board games and preparing food in a different way maybe it's like 30 degrees outside and we're still going out and we're cooking in a cast iron open oven fire. So having that skill set, if you get stranded for a night, it's really not the end of the world, because you've built in those neural pathways from the repetitions,
Mm.
right? If there's a supply chain issue, you and you have access to public land, you know how to hunt, you know how to process animals down. Like I was processing a goat right before I got on the podcast with you. It's just that's something that every couple months, we do our best to process an animal, because it keeps me sharp. Because if you don't use it, you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting ready to process a couple pigs, so I just wanted to make sure that my knife work was all good to go. And then we'll be putting meat aside. So it's having those skill sets. It's really important, dude. And for what we call primitive skills or modern survival skills, for our ancestors was just day-to-day life. Like you're right, we have created this convenience, these creature comforts that have created this mass complacency, and we are so dependent on something being provided for us when we go online and we hit okay pay, and it shows up a day later, or Grubhub, or whatever it is. And if that's all you have, that's all you have. I hear that. I'm not going to judge. I don't care. But for
Right.
me, like making the extra effort to take a basic first aid class, to improve the quality of your health and fitness, to learn how to cook over an open fire, to learn how to prepare food. There's so many people who have no idea the source of what it is they're consuming. There's
Mm-hmm.
such a disconnect. And that to me is that's an epidemic issue, for people to not know what it takes to put a meal in front of them, whether it's, preparing all the soil, sowing the seed, tending the plant throughout the entirety of its life, harvesting and then preserving the food, or raising an animal, knowing how to kill the animal, break it down and preserve it, knowing how to barter. These are all things that we know how to do. It's in our genetics, it's in our DNA. This is how our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors lived. And it's very sad for me to see people have that disconnect and not understand um, basic needs of survival. Knowing how to regulate your core body temperature, knowing how to find water, how to have food, how to make tools, stuff along those lines. Um, and even if you live in a very heavily populated urban environment, there's ways to connect with the natural landscape and to kind of to start to learn these tasks on a small scale level. And then maybe in time you'll have a couple acres and some animals, and you'll be living the homestead life.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with everything you said. And like, when I asked that question, it's more so like to understand, like not for myself, but just in general, or like the person listening is like, man, I got all this stuff, like Grubhub, like just in
Yep.
the stores here, like people don't even shop for their own food anymore. Well, I don't say everyone, but
Yeah.
a good amount of people, because they just kind of it's curbside pickup. So it's just, I mean, that's pretty prevalent here, and it annoys the crap out of me. But to each their own, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, sure. And like I said,
but
I'm not going to judge. If that's what you
right, right,
have, that's
right.
what you have.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
actually, I want to touch one more thing, because the shelter, water, and fire is mostly for, the outdoor wilderness stuff. I think a couple of the components that people should really have an understanding of is basic first aid. You know, knowing how to plug a hole, knowing how to keep somebody warm, or to heat them back up if they've gone hypothermic. My first interaction with hypothermia was when I was 10 years old. On two different occasions, we were on a winter camping trip, and this dude fell through the ice. And he was he was one of the Boy Scouts in our troop, and we had to treat him for hypothermia. And then a couple months later, I was in a sleeping bag, and I was in like the second stage of hypothermia, where you're massively shivering and mumbling, and it was about to get really bad. Um, and so knowing how to treat people with that, knowing how to stop bleeding, how to start breathing, um, is really, 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 really important. And then communication, like we have become so complacent because of our ability to communicate with our thumbs, and that is taking away from engaging in human interaction, right? We don't really have to communicate with one another if we don't want to. And I think that is a very big downfall and pit to our society, because we're learning what it means to speak with our neighbor, to ask for help, to help them, to just to carry on a basic conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean small talk, but like talking about like, how's your day, like how are you doing, how are you feeling. So communication on that level, but then also knowing how to use like walkie talkies and ham radio. That's pretty important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one thing that I was calm when I was in the Air Force.
Right
So
on.
everything like it was funny how we failed to communicate in the comm squadron. Like that was our bread and butter, but it was like the hard,
Yeah.
like establishing comms and all these things. But it's just it's funny, like at the human level, that's where a lot of things broke down. But like most of our comms were good to go, at least the stuff we touched and stuff. But we took pride in that. It is a skill, right? Communication is a skill, and the more I learned how to do it, the better I get at it, right? And I'm able to process these thoughts and we're able to have this conversation. And that's one of the things for this podcast is to kind of bring that back, right? The storytelling, the sharing of information, the like the processing and like just unscripted in various ways. I mean, I have a few questions here, but that's just trying to
Yeah,
put
man.
more effort into it. Before I was kind of just a little bit like, I still want to go in this flow, right, of
Yeah,
conversation,
yeah.
this the chemistry and all these different things that kind of hopefully resonate with the audience. But that's really what it is: long form conversation to kind of unpackage some of these things to help others that are listening and just kind of throw it out in the ether. I'm not looking to like get famous off of this or nothing. It's just like let's just let it put these out there, and when they hit the right person, when they're ready for it, may it help them, or at least start to spark that curiosity, right? Um, so I got two more for you, and then we could call it. I mean, we'll wrap it
Yeah,
up.
dude.
Um, so one of these is well, I'll leave that one for last. So how is this when starting it? Like, how has it helped you understand when you started bushcrafting again and you started like farming again? How does this kind of make you more connected with nature, God, or just the existence of all things?
Yeah, dude, that's an awesome question. I I think like you, because you had alluded to this earlier, I look at all of religion as um, information to be gleaned from, right? So I don't follow Catholicism, I don't follow Christianity, I don't follow Buddhism, Taoism, whatever it is. I look at all of them as information that can be beneficial for me, however appropriate. And so the biggest way that I feel I can connect with God is through nature. And every morning when I'm done with my cold bath, I go outside, and even if it's a cloudy day, I'll face to where I know the sun is coming up, and I'll just take a minute and just be grateful, right? And I list, the small things that I'm grateful, the sky and the earth, the four winds, the my family, my farm, and really, and my ancestors too. I am spiritual on that level, and that's really important for me, to acknowledge that. Um, and in doing so, it's just like I'm starting off. I feel the day right. I'm acknowledging this thing that exists. And it doesn't mean it's like some some large figure in the heavens with his finger, shaming you or shaming me or whatever. For me, God is creation, and God is having the ability to put hands into the soil. It's having the ability to walk out into the woods and listen to the bird songs, and to look at the tracks and the trails that happen throughout the night, and to build a fire with limited resources. That to me is a moment of God. That is a moment of creation. That is a moment of gratitude. And if I don't have that in my life, I feel disconnected.
Mm-hmm.
We were just in New York City for a conference with Guardian Revival and the Tunnels to Towers Foundation. And, New York City is New York City. There's a lot of concrete, there's a lot of glass, there's a lot of metal, but there's trees And for me, if I can look at how this plant is surviving through these cracks in a sidewalk, that to me is a moment of grace. And I think it's a great metaphor for our lives. Like, it doesn't matter all the nonsense and the bullshit that you put before us. Like, there's this moment of beauty that existed there, right? That's nature holding on. And to me, that's God, right? And so I was able to find that in that place when I was apart from Vermont, from the Northeast, where we have an abundance of trees and rivers and wildlife, you know. So if I don't have that, I definitely feel as though I'm not as connected, but I know that the connection is there if I want it to be there, and I'm able to find it. And does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, there's no wrong answer, or there's no, like, you know what I mean? There's
Okay.
no wrong or right answer.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just whatever you feel. And it's like for myself too, it's coupling all these different understandings and kind of the same, right? It's I do believe that there is an intelligence presence, but I mean, whether that's a person in the sky as some people see it, or just an all-knowing like being, like which just kind of moves in
yeah,
and around, omnipresence. Because anytime I'm in nature, and I do feel like God is nature and we are God and vice versa. um
yep,
I'm not really. I'm still diving down deep into the the Bible and stuff like that, just because that's revisiting my life as a kid growing up, kind of
yeah,
what was kind of taught to me. I was like, but I didn't have the experience to understand what I was being told. And then when I asked questions, it was like, um, when I asked questions, it was like I was questioning God. Like, no. So that kind of turned me off from it. But I do feel there's a
yep,
lot of wisdom in there, as within in many other books and religions, and but I think the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? And I'm still on that path. And
yeah,
to answer your question, I mean, you answered, your answer is your answer, and I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other. I'm just trying to understand, because I do feel the more I got into nature, the more I understood myself and the more I understood God. And like for that, like,
yep,
and it brought me back to there's good and evil. I know that. And sometimes there's been some things that happen in my life where I can't explain it, right? And I just felt like this
yeah,
presence of evil. I just keep it there, right? And I don't know what that is. So I know there's something external, whether it's another dimension or realm or a place that you cannot see. Either way, so it's just kind of really trying to dial in everything, because I feel like trauma is like when you start off as a kid, you're like, innocent, and then you kind of grow through life, and these, experiences kind of hit you both good and bad, and it starts to break you
yep,
up, break you apart. And then the more traumatic those events are, the further and further you get away from the center of yourself. And it's like trying to find your way back to the middle is to
sure.
understand. So I say to say this. Yeah, I probably answered too much, but yeah, I agree with you. And there's no right or wrong answer. Like I said, she said, "Ask what future endeavors do you have planned, and what are you looking forward to?"
Right on. Um, so I think what I'm looking forward to, I'll answer that one first, is I have a couple of races coming up. There's a 70-hour individual effort that's coming up at the end of June. Um, our adventure race team is supposed to be going to Scotland here in the next at the beginning of next month, to do a 54-mile ruck through the Highlands. I'm looking forward to those two
I'm
things.
going with you on that.
Yeah, dude, we're trying to figure it out.
Uh,
We're waiting to hear back so we can get details. And I don't know. I'm not the head person in contact, but
got you.
um, we're trying to figure it out so that way we can get everything hammered out to get to Scotland for the Yump. So once that's squared away, I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh
And
yeah,
then I'm looking forward to the death race at the end of the June. And then in this fall, I'm doing a 30-hour race solo. It's just as many loops as you can in 30 hours. And my goal is to get 75 miles. Um, and then we have another race coming up with Flow State Endurance. That's our adventure race team in the fall. So at some point, I think October, November. So I'm looking forward to those things. Um, what I have planned for the future is, an expansion of teaching survival, and food systems, and then spending time with my family. That's really been a big thing. I had another should be dead incident about a year and a half ago,
Mm.
and ever since then I've had a lot of shift in my perspective, and just not letting, or doing my best to not let petty things get to me, um, and to really embrace the entirety of my life, and a large part of that is my family. And so I've been actively working to spend more time with my family. My wife, she's been with me. We've been together for, I think, 13 or 14 years. We've been married for 13. We've been together for 14. And she has been such a wonderful asset and partner. And I'm very grateful, because there's many times where she probably should have just walked away, and has stuck with me through that. And I'm very incredibly grateful for that. And then my kids, man, that's my life. And so I want to be able to appreciate all the time that we spend together. And that's really something I strive for on a regular basis, is to move beyond the emotions that are keeping me unpresent or distracted, and really finding ways to be with them as whole as possible, and to find value in them, because my boys are getting older. They're going to be out of the house soon, and that's something that kind of gets me teary, because I love them.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm really at a point in my life where I can find even more appreciation towards them, and when they were babies and all that. And so I look forward to just being being family, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. Yeah, those are good things to look forward to, and to try to keep the balance of it all, right? I mean, there's all these things that I'm sure you want to do, and like these callings to do it, but it's also like time doesn't stop for anyone, and it just keeps moving forward.
Yep.
And if we don't consciously make the efforts or attempts to try to keep that cohesiveness of family or friends or whoever you value in your life, it definitely can get away from you, and then we have regrets. But with
Yeah, dude,
that,
you can't get time back, man.
yeah, I used to have on my Instagram post. It's actually on my retirement plaque, which is in the closet. Um, it says, "Time is the only true currency," and I really truly believe that. Like, but yeah, it's the one thing that, and I waste fucking time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like, I can be more efficient with my time, but I don't. And that's one skill I'm trying to work on. But John, I really appreciate you, man, as a person, as a human, everything you're doing. And where can people find you and see what you're doing? And just to recap real quick, those endurance races, those are to like raise money, or are they to just a personal goal to see if you can do it, or are they both?
It's a mix of both. So the 70-hour one that's at the end of June, that's really just to do it because it's a hard thing.
Mhm.
And I after the military, man, um, and after all my friends who have ended their lives, and after another live day that I had a year and a half ago, it's just I don't want to continue to go through life having not. I don't want to be like live it to the fullest, but I in a way, yeah, I want to make sure that when I am on my deathbed, whenever that might be, is that I don't look back and say, man, I wish I had done that at that point in my life. And so I try to do as many hard things as I can, because why not? And so the death race for me is to honor like my time on earth, but to honor my buddies who are no longer on earth. Um, the other the other races that I'm doing with Flow State Endurance are as a fundraiser for Guardian Revival, which is a nonprofit out of the Hudson Valley that works with veterans and first responders. And so we are kind of like sponsored amateur athletes, and we go do endurance races and adventure races and raise money for Guardian. But um, yeah, so I mean, it's a mix of both. Like we do things for other organizations, and then there's a lot of personal stuff as well. But people can find me on Instagram. It's the_fieldcraft_farmer or Wild Roots Farm Vermont. So those are our two. The race team is flow_state_endurance. And then we have a website. I have a website, wildrootsfarmvermont.com.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate what you're doing and how you're doing it and who you're doing it for. It's definitely important that we kind of share our skills and kind of put ego aside, like we just earlier. And because the
Amen.
more people, I think that's a thing that we learned in the military is train the next person up, because you
For
never
sure.
know. And but yeah, I appreciate it. And when you're back in Texas, let me know. Hopefully, we can talk more on that yomp. But
Yeah, dude.
if you're in Texas, we'll definitely do this in the studio. I'll cook something for you, or we could cook something together.
Yes.
Yeah, man.
Yes, man.
Hell yeah. And I look forward to that. And hopefully I can make it out to one of your survival classes. That would be awesome because that's something that's a different vein that I'm trying to hone. But yeah, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. And yeah, let me know if anything, man, if you ever just need a vent or curse me out just to feel better and go from there.
Hey, brother, man, I appreciate what you guys are doing at back home for you in San Antonio and then with the Dirt Therapy Project. And you have an awesome family, you have an awesome network of people there. And I'm very grateful that you all have each other, dude. That's huge. Side note, when the time is right, probably in a couple weeks, I want to have you on our podcast because we started one as well for Flow State.
Oh, hell yeah.
And we're just trying to talk with people who are moving forward after they've been through whatever it is in their lives,
Mhm.
specifically the first responder community. And so what you all are doing is it's really powerful, and we would like to capture that as well.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'd definitely love to do that. I appreciate your time. Hope you have a good day. Enjoy Vermont, man. It's beautiful out there.
Same, brother. Be well.
All right, man. Take care. All right, out.
Yeah, dude. You're welcome whenever.
Change, looking for pain, pulling a mob, pushing a train. I'll never stop, stick to a lane, pick up the pieces and go rearrange. I'll be the best above all the rest, put me to the test and expect nothing less. Your check as I'm chess, what's happening next? Yeah. He got the venom, a tangible weapon, no coming in second. This life is a lesson. He got a new engine from pain, it's a blessing. New focus, no guessing, just bold and obsession. All in his possession, you got their attention. I'll leave an impression and take a redemption. Just kill no discretion. Your mind is a weapon. 11-11, it's time for progression. Could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy. Bloody and stained from the people who deceive me. Muddy hands break through the chains, go free me.